Welcome to the Reduce Cyber Risk Podcast, where we give you the tools you need to meet your cybersecurity regulatory requirements while helping secure your business and keep the evil hacker horde at bay. Hi, my name is Shon Gerber, and I'm your host for this action-packed, informative podcast. Join me each week as I provide the information you need to best protect your business and reduce your company's cyber risk. All right, let's get going. All right, so we're going to start off with some great stuff that's happening in the cybersecurity news space. And we kind of break these broadcasts out into different aspects. One is cybersecurity news, and then also we roll into cybersecurity training. So the first aspect is cybersecurity news. What are some key things that we're going to go over in this broadcast? And it's going to be the largest email and password breach ever discovered. And I mean, it is a ton of emails and passwords that have been breached. And because of that, we're going to kind of get into some follow-on stuff that's highly recommended that you do, especially as you're looking at ways to protect yourself from cyber hackers and attackers. So we'll get into that. Second one is the PCI SSC releases a brand new security standard for payment software. And this is part of the payment card industry standards, and they've released some new stuff out there that is supposed to be designed to help you in if you're a vendor or if you are a consumer of these the different payment card industry aspects, is that they've got a way to help protect your information. So the cybersecurity news, those are the big things, and then we'll roll into some cybersecurity training around information security governance, part 2. Okay, we did part 1 in the last episode, and now we'll be doing part 2 as a follow-on. All right, let's get started. All right, so this recent breach, it's an email and password breach. And it's the largest emails and password breach that's ever been discovered. Now, this was in The Guardian, and also, if I sound like a little nasally, I apologize. I've got a cold that I'm fighting through, so it's not the best. But The Guardian had a article from Alex Hearn, and he said there was 1,160,253,228 unique combinations of emails and passwords that were set up, that were basically confiscated. And that is a lot of emails. Now, I've got a lot of emails. I do. And I shouldn't say a lot. I've got at least 3 to 4 different emails that I use. So that doesn't mean there's 1 billion different people. But at the end of the day, that is a lot of emails that have been collected. Well, these things can be used in so many different ways. And the purpose also is that there was 21,222,975 unique passwords. Okay, these are unique passwords. They're not the same. They're different. So what that comes down to is we call this credential stuffing. And Troy Hunt had also had this in his article as well. That was in Alex Hearn's article, and talked about how these were the different passwords that are out there for all these people, and they call it credential stuffing. And really what it comes down to is most people will use the same username or a combination of their email address and a similar username, and then they'll use the same password. It happens all the time. Well, so what do? They make a combination or a variation of their current password. So let's just say you've got QWERTY1234556. Okay, so that's a password. Or monkey. Monkey's probably easier. So you got monkey as your password, and if the capital M and an exclamation point at the end of E or of the Y, I can't even spell, and maybe a 0 for the O. So you got monkey. Well, then you'll have monkey 1 and monkey 2 and monkey 3. Well, most people they keep the same password, but they make a derivation of the original, and they add a 1 or an exclamation point or something else at the end of it. Now, that's not good. So what happens is people will have all these email addresses, and they'll have these unique passwords that are very similar, and then people will steal these usernames, and then they will just use these passwords over and over and over again. And because people randomly reuse the same password, what happens? Well, now instead of just having access to, let's just say, I don't know, your subscription to Kitties R Us, you now have access to your bank account and to your credit cards and so forth. So it's important, it's imperative, right, that if you have any sort of credentials, that you utilize a password manager of some kind, i.e. there's a couple different options. There's 1Password, there's LastPass. I highly recommend something along those lines. Especially if you're a business, you should have something in this area, especially if you have people that are employees that are using passwords. And having your employees use the same password, or having them use the same vault, may not be the best choice depending on if they leave, but at a minimum, if you have a vault of some kind where all your passwords are stored, that would be good. The second thing you need to make sure you do is you use a strong password generator to help you with making your passwords hard to guess, right? So instead of just having monkey 1, 2, 3, 4 through 10, you have monkey gazillion, right? Monkey with 32 different letters behind it. The whole point is that you want to make this as hard as possible on the attackers. And credential stuffing is a really big deal. And now with this big breach, it's more imperative than ever that you do not reuse your same passwords. You may not have a choice when it comes to usernames, but your passwords for sure, you definitely don't want to reuse those at all. All right, so let's roll on the next one. So now this area, this is about PCI. The SSC releases a new security standard for payment software. Now, PCI is your payment card industry, and in the past they have data security standards that they would put in place. Well, this is the SSC, so this is around a secure software standard that is out. And I've got some developers that work for me, and we work real hard to develop code based on a secure development lifecycle, right? Or a software development lifecycle that's secure. And the whole purpose of that, though, is as you're developing these applications, you want to make sure that they are most possibly secure as they possibly can be. In the past, applications have not really been a priority to make sure that they're secure. It's been, you just get them out there. Well, now that everything has gone mobile and everything is pretty much being used on a platform where you can use credit cards through Apple Pay, through any sort of scanning of your Starbucks card, you can scan it with a barcode. All of that stuff is all integrated. Well, now it's more important than ever that if you're accepting credit cards or you're building applications based on credit card technology, that you do secure development of this. And I was reading a book recently about artificial intelligence with China and how they've used WeChat now is pretty much taken over all of China, and they have everything integrated into it. Well, if you're a third-party developer utilizing WeChat, you need to make sure that you create a good application that's secure. Well, here's a good example of that. So now what happened is PCI SSC came out with some standards around this, a software security framework. Basically, we talked about before as it relates to the CISSP, a framework is like guideposts or guidelines on what you should do. Well, the security standard, it basically summarizes the security requirements and assessment procedures that you need to follow, especially as you're developing software. Default configurations. Don't utilize default configurations, and if you do utilize default configurations, make sure there's a certain level of security built into that. Identification of critical assets, protection of sensitive data. All the things we've talked about in CISSP training that I've put out there is, again, you need to focus on these key things. Access control and authentication, big deal, right? Because right now it used to be where the perimeter was the protection for the network. Well, now everybody's device is connected to the network, so there's a network everywhere. Threat detection, know when the bad guys are actually after you, and security guidance for vendors. And this is a big one, the security guidance for vendors. As a third-party vendors that get access to your environment, they need to have some level of security built into this as well. So again, it's a really good standard out there. I haven't had a chance to dig into it deeply, but if you're an application developer, you can expect that you'll be held to the standard around this stuff. There's also a second page that kind of went on this with the PCI CSS. It talked about organizations who sell goods. That's one of their security goals is if you're an organization that sells goods and you have an application, they want to make sure that they provide a secure environment for these people that do that. And also vendors creating products. So if you're building credit card applications, do you have it properly secured? And so like, again, a good example of that would be the Starbucks. So Starbucks has an app. They make sure their app is developed correctly so that it integrates with credit card systems. So therefore, it needs to follow a framework to ensure that the product that's being created is secure. They had an additional goal, which was one of the main ones, again, around security. And this is where you're going to see a lot with businesses as well, that they're going to be forced to do this at some point, is vulnerability detection and mitigation, governance, security testing, threat detection. Again, you saw these before, but a lot of the stuff we've talked about as a CISSP, if you're looking at this from a standpoint of a security professional, these are all things you need to be considered. If you're a business, you need to be considering all of these aspects because guess what? You now are responsible for that. You have been in the past, you're even more now. Security software updates, change management, and communications. And these are some of the additional goals that they have around the application security. And they came up with all of this based on feedback from vendors, assessors, and payment security experts. And again, it's kind of come full circle where we're seeing more and more businesses that are being held to a higher standard. And this is just another example of now the payment card industry is focusing on that as well. And they also know that if they push this out, it reduces the risk of them having to pay to offset losses due to errors that are set up, right? And it's just better for the community to come to some form of standard. Whether if the government comes up with it or they come up with their own standard, something needs to be done to help make that consistent across the board. All right. Okay, so now we're going to roll into some training. This is going to be part two of our Information Security Governance Program. It's a CISSP, which is your Certified Information Security Systems Professional, I believe, or Systems Security Professional, one of the two. I keep screwing it up, but your CISSP supplement. All right, so let's get off into that. Now, you're trying to be asking yourself, what are my next steps for building an information security governance program? Well, you need to understand and communicate the purpose of the governance. Okay, so are you going to be draconian and have very strict see, I had the word, but I lost it because my third grade education just kicked in. You have very strict guidelines and areas that you can only limit people to. There's a better word, but I can't think of it. And then cyber risks can be a business impact. So you need to understand and communicate this governance situation to them. You also need to understand what is your reputational damage, if any, in the case of a cyber attack. I was in a situation just recently where we're talking about the front end of our websites, right? And there were some licensing issues, and the licensing came down and said, well, it's too expensive. Well, that's an IT person making that decision. Is that the business making that decision? Not necessarily. So what ends up happening is, well, IT says, well, it's $10,000 too much or $50,000 too much. Well, if your company's a $100 million company, or that brand is a $100 million brand, is 50 grand too much to keep the site from getting hacked? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's something that you are concerned about, and maybe you're not really concerned about it. Just kind of depends. Board and senior leaders. Now, these people will provide the strategic direction, right? And they're the ones that you need to get on board with this. They'll have the help with the policy, the strategy, and help define the risk. Okay, so you need to understand that. Oh, back up on the understanding part is your legal liability. You need to really kind of get a good example of that and work with your lawyers to help you kind of put that into place. The board and senior leaders as well need to be able to provide you the resources you need to be successful. They align the responsibilities as well on who's responsible for what. I like to call them RR&Es, your roles, responsibilities, and expectations. They help set those with you, and they also help set what is the expectations for the organization. They also help set priorities. What is a priority for the organization? Now, that would be your CIO in many cases, would be your IT leadership. But the board may say, yeah, that's great, but we really want you to focus on this because it's more valuable. Again, board and the senior leaders, they just must be involved. And for this to work, for you to have a good program, they've got to be involved. Next steps, part deux. Okay, that means two in French, I think. Next steps, part two. All right, your senior management action. They must provide some level of oversight for you. And they must lead the security policy creation to help guide where you're going to create your policies and what you're going to do with them and what's in them. They're going to define the RR&Es, again, for what are your security roles, responsibilities supposed to be, and how should you be adequately measured against them. They'll analyze and monitor threats and vulnerabilities. That's where you want senior management to also back you on that. Now, they may not be doing it, probably are not doing it, but they should support you, and that's what you want them to do. And they should also help support the fact that monitoring is enabled and periodic reviews of security are occurring. All of these things are key pieces. And then finally, security awareness training and education program is in place. That are some key steps that you need to look at. So from all of those, if you start looking and focusing down these paths, you'll be very successful, because this is a good way for like a little mini framework on where you need to go to create a security governance program for your company. Now we're getting into expectations. You need to consider strategic thinking for your business. We talked about that at the beginning, is what is a strategic plan? Well, you need to consider your IT security costs and your security policy creation. How do those play into strategic vision for your company and where you're planning on going? As an example, if you say, you know what, we're selling off all of our company, and you want to put in place a policy for or say we're selling off all of our European company or business, but yet you're focused on GDPR. Well, is that really a good use of your resources? Probably not. So you need to understand what is your strategic thinking for your business. You need to communicate your IT strategy policies with the business themselves. Talk to them about what you're trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it. And then define security incidents and what is the business aspect behind them. So often I've seen it where an incident will come up and people don't even really know what to do with it, let alone try to convey that to the business and figure out what is the impact of it. You know, you have a situation where a hacker takes over a system and you have ransomware and it installs on a critical server. The critical server is no longer available. What do? How's that going to impact your business? Could be substantial, right? So those things have to be considered. Also, establishment of business continuity plans. So as we talk about in the CISSP, your business continuity plans will operate and let you keep your business going. And it might be a very specific business aspect that you have in place. But that is your business continuity plan. And you want to ensure that those are in place if needed. Now, as it comes down to expectations, you set those around risk management. You need to account and protect IT assets based on risk, not based on how you feel, just based on the risk of the system. Is it the most critical? Is it not? If it's not, why even spend a whole lot of time and energy and effort on it? Restrict access to critical data. You know, you need to limit that, right? If you can limit access to these critical data and restrict it and put protections on it, you dramatically reduce the risk to your company. Also, vulnerabilities and incident planning. Plan for those. You need to have a plan in place to deal with your incidents because they will come up. It's a guaranteed it's going to happen. I guarantee you. Now, you pray that it's small, but at the end of the day, it will happen. And you need to develop continuity plans that need to be executed. And what is the plan in place for those to occur? So those are some of the expectations on those. Now, resource management. You need to help account for assets. As you're looking to manage the resources within your organization, you need to account for the assets. And that's a key part, an inventory plan. You need to do an inventory to understand what do you actually have within your company and what are the assets in place. And you also need to ensure that IT and their services and infrastructure, whether it's internal or outsourced to a third party, can recover from issues that they uncover. You need to ensure the performance of the network and that it's solid, it's always working. And then measurement. You need to look and understand what are the different types of events that are occurring within your environment and how to best alert on those, from obsolete accounts, malware, elevated privileges, etc., etc. So the more you can have those things in front of you, the better off you are and the quicker you will resolve them if you're constantly looking at them. Now, what's the evolution of this? Well, guess what? Security is evolving. Just like I was listening to a commercial, and some gentleman said that he was swimming in the ocean. He goes, you know what? As we're swimming in the ocean, the coral, our long lost ancestors. I'm like, I did not come from a coral. So, but maybe somebody did, right? But it's evolving, just like the coral is evolving into us, and we are evolving from the coral. Security is evolving, and organization assets become more valuable as the time goes on. Why? Because they're everywhere, and we have more sensitive data that's inside these things, and they're like little vacuum machines that suck up all kinds of data. All these assets do. So it's also a necessity to address the legal and regulatory issues. More and more companies are creating things that are going to be regulatory issues you're going to have to fight through. And it could be a competitive advantage or a disadvantage depending upon how well you handle it or decide not to deal with it. One of the two. Privacy and cybercrime is growing. Why? It's all about the money, baby. Show me the money and I'll show you the bad guys. Why? Because there's money there. If there's money there, they're after it. They want an easy buck and they want to make it happen. So in some respects, I don't blame them. Don't agree with it, but don't blame them. So it's also tentacles of various law enforcement agencies are everywhere. So now you've got the issues of Interpol, you've got FBI, you've got all these other all these other law enforcement agencies that are involved, and they all talk, not necessarily to each other, but they do talk. And so that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And then finally, critical infrastructure is increasingly targeted. So you've got your power plants. They're being targeted. Why? Well, because they make a big impact. Not because they have money. It's because they make a big impact. If I can shut down the power grid to New York City, I have no idea if you could even do that. Probably can at some point. Then the whole city goes black. Well, guess what? I can stand up and say, street cred, I did it. It's all me. And those things are becoming a bigger and bigger issue. The sad part is that people, unfortunately, may get hurt seriously because of these things and potentially even die because of a system that may get hacked in the future. So that's where the evolution is going. It's becoming much riskier, and the data is becoming more valuable. Now, this is I saw some research items out there that are kind of interesting. And the Aberdeen Group research, they talked about this. 90% of risk can be reduced by implementing known and commonly used security practices. Boom, 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 boom. And that's for sure. I guarantee you. If you can reduce, you can, now you're not going to eliminate the bad guys getting into you, but man, you can dramatically reduce some person from getting into your network if you would do the best practices. Now you can't always do them, but if you just did 90% of them or 80%, well, that's 80% more than most people do. So it's important to do that. Now, IT Governance Institute, they had this, and they said firms operating at best-in-class security levels are lowering financial losses to less than 1% of revenue, whereas other organizations are experiencing loss rates that exceed 5%. Okay, so the guy who's not a math major can barely spell my names, hence it's phonetic, S-H-O-N. Haha, see, I'm brilliant. The context of that is a $1 billion company. So let's just say your revenue is $1 billion. And that's a good size, medium-sized business. Kind of pushing a little bit on the large, but more on the medium-sized business. Well, to put it in perspective, 1%, okay, so 1% of $1 billion is $10 million. Okay, so if you can drop your losses to less than $10 million, which I still think is a gob of money, then versus your organization that can bring it to 5%, which is $50 million, that's a big difference just for putting in best-in-class security. Now, I would argue that best-in-class security, at what point do you go too far and end up overspending to try to get that extra level of protection? So that's the sweet spot you got to try to figure out. Now, some questions you need to ask, and these are just a few questions to kind of get your juices going. But does the board or senior leaders understand the company's dependence on information and the associated systems? Is there a CISO or other designated officer who's specifically tasked with managing information security within your organization? Yeah, and you get there's a lot of companies or regulations that are coming out now that you have to have somebody designated. Now, it could be a third party, but someone has to be designated as a security person. Are there appropriate training and awareness programs ensuring employees, contractors are aware of the security responsibilities? And is there an incident response plan or process to deal with security incidents or situations? Now, this is just these are just 4 questions of a gob of questions you can ask yourself. But bottom line is it's just to kind of get your thoughts going, your juices flowing, as they would say. Now, how do you compare your organization? You need to look at some self-assessment goals, and this helps provide a litmus test about your organization and how you're doing. It provides also guidance on security targets for the future. What are you trying to accomplish? And these are how you're self-assessing. Am I good? Do I live or do I die, per Caesar? So you have to decide, how is that? And now you can also wing it and say, hey, we're awesome. But if you get hacked, you're not so awesome. So those are things you got to really be honest with yourself, and you got to hope that your leadership wants to be told the truth. You need to plan projects to reach these targets. Okay, so you've figured out what your targets are. Now you got to plan projects to make it happen. And you got to prioritize your work based on the risk and the impact analysis. Again, it's all about the risk, hence the name, Reduce Cyber Risk. So we're going to kind of talk about some key points here in these maturity models, starting at 0, going all the way up to 5. So 0 basically means it don't exist. You have nothing, so no security program at all. You are totally reactionary, and yeah, there's nothing. You're like going, yeah, I know risk management is important, but yeah, I'm not going to do it. Business does not value or consider the vulnerabilities and the issue. Yep, not going to do it. So where do these people fall? Well, in many cases, in my experience, again, my experience is a little bit less than many people in regards to this, but my experience is it's usually a small businesses are kind of fall in the non-existent period. They have no money. They're trying to make things happen, and the last thing they want to do is talk about security. They're going, yawn. This just takes away time that I'm trying to make money. So that, again, not all small businesses by any stretch of the imagination, but I see this commonly within the small business world. Maturity models, okay? The other one is, and number 1 is initial or ad hoc, which basically means you've got something on the books a little bit, and you're kind of making it as it goes, and you're totally reactive, but you have something, right? You just kind of stuck your big toe into the water to kind of feel how it is, and then you go from there. They're very informal with limited authority, but that's the ad hoc model. It's repeatable. See, I can't even speak. Repeatable, but intuitive, which basically means it's important and we're still growing. It's in the fertile stage. It's in the paramecium stage, wanting to evolve into the monkey that gets his tail ripped off as he stands up because he's in so much pain, right? So it's in the amoeba stage, right, where it's just growing, immature. It's assigned to individuals as additional duties with no management authority, and the responsibilities assigned but still fragmented. This is not a bad place. I know a lot of people that are in this place. I'm in this place in some places where it is repeatable, and it is, but it's not that intuitive. And there is a lot of hands-on stuff that has to occur, which isn't very good. So, and again, a company may have pieces where you're number 5 in one spot and number 1 in another spot. Hopefully you're not number 0. That would be bad. Just don't do that. Define process is number 3. It's a risk management policies are in place, then define risk assessments. Yay. Security awareness exists and is being promoted, which is a good thing. And management is involved. Big, big, big winner. Pull out the bell and start banging on that gong. That's a big thing. Number 4 is managed and measurable. Risk assessments are considered standard operating procedure. This happens so often where they're not. Well, if you can get into level 4, that's a big win. It really is. And responsibilities for information security are clearly defined. Again, you may have pieces of this that are in place and other pieces that are not. So that doesn't mean that overall you're a 4 or a 1. It means you just need to be realistic with how do you really see yourself and compare yourself to that things. And then finally, responsibilities and standards are enforced. Now it comes to the granddaddy, the grand poobah. Number 5 is optimized. Risk management is developed to a structured, organized process. Okay, you're hearing lights and songs of birds flying around and little butterflies. Information security is a joint responsibility of the business and IT leadership. Key thing there, big boys, and girls, that's huge. And then business continuity and continuous service plans are integrated and aligned. Everybody's in alignment that they will have continuous business operation in the event of issues. Okay, so what we just went over was the information security governance and what do you need to do to put in place and some key things to think about as you are putting that in place. Here's some of the training that we got it from. I've got my information from is ISC Square's Training Guide, April 2018 edition. It's a really good book. Recommended if you're looking for the CISSP. Awesome book. Really is. Lots of information. Gobs of information. And then ISACA is talking about some of the stuff around board of directors and how to talk to the executives as well. They have a really good paper. It's about 70-some pages long, but it's a really good paper, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, this is about the Information Security Governance Program and creating that tied into my CISSP supplement that goes into my CISSP course that is available for purchase. All right, have a great day, and we'll catch you on the flip side. See ya. Thanks so much for joining me today on my podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave a review, and as I would greatly appreciate any and all feedback. Also, check out my videos that are on YouTube. Just search for Shon Gerber, and you will find the plethora of content to help you secure your business. Lastly, head on over to Reduce Cyber Risk and look at all the free stuff that's available for our email subscribers. It's growing each and every day. Thanks again for listening. See ya!